I'm 29. I live in Austin. I thought I was past this, the part where I hoped for a seat at the table. Turns out, some stories come back when you least expect them. It started with a group chat. And a missing name. No drama, no harsh words, just silence. And somehow, that hurt more. I didn't tell anyone. I packed my bag anyway, because sometimes you don't go on the trip to belong. You go to learn why you never truly did. I should have said something, not loud, not angry. Just something. When I opened that group chat and saw the final itinerary, hotel room assignments, car rentals, head counts for dinner, and my name wasn't anywhere, my first reaction wasn't rage. It was that old, familiar ache, that quiet voice inside that whispered, "Don't be dramatic. Maybe they just forgot." So I typed, "Hey, did you mean to leave me off the room list?" And I stared at it for 10 minutes. Then I erased it, like I've erased myself before, to keep things smooth, to keep them comfortable. I booked a room on my own, 3 miles from the hotel where the rest of them were staying. I told myself it was fine. I could use the extra space, right? Some quiet to rest. But walking into that lobby, alone, with no one waiting, no keycard saved for me, no "we're so glad you made it" hug, that wasn't space. That was exile. At dinner that first night, they barely noticed I was late. They were already 2 drinks in, talking about cousins I hadn't seen in years, inside jokes I didn't belong to anymore. Someone handed me a menu. No one asked how my flight was. It wasn't the missing room. It was the missing welcome. That's when I realized this isn't new. This is just the first time I didn't make excuses for them out loud. I always told myself I was the independent one, the strong one, the one who didn't need checking in on. But maybe that wasn't strength. Maybe it was just how they got used to not showing up. You know what hurts most? It's not being hurt. It's being the only one who notices. At the table, I watched my mother ask my brother if he needed more water. She used to ask me that too, when I was 12. She hasn't asked since I turned 21. I guess strong girls pour their own water. I didn't say anything. I smiled. I asked how work was going. I folded myself into their comfort. But deep down, I kept thinking, why does loving them always mean not needing them? Why do I have to shrink to stay welcome? That night, back at my little solo hotel room, I lay on the bed I paid for, one they never thought to offer, and I stared at the ceiling like it could answer the question I was too tired to ask out loud. I should have said something. I still don't know what. Maybe just, I felt forgotten. I wanted to matter. But then again, if they didn't notice I was missing, would they have heard me anyway? I arrived before sunset. The air was soft, golden, and I remember thinking how strange it was to feel so completely alone in a place that was meant to hold people I called family. I stepped into the hotel lobby, dragging a small suitcase behind me. Polished floors, a scent of citrus, a little too cheerful. I gave my name. The receptionist tapped a few keys, smiled politely, and said there was no reservation under my name. She looked again, then looked at me, as if I was the mistake. And for a second, I thought I was. I called my sister. No answer. I texted in the group, "Hey, which room am I in?" No reply. 10 minutes passed. Then one message came through. "Oh, that's odd." That was it. That's odd. Like I was a wrinkle in a tablecloth, an oversight, a deleted line on the itinerary. They said maybe I could crash on the floor in the kids' room. Said it like they were doing me a favor. But I wasn't 20 anymore. I wasn't a backpack and a sleeping bag. I was a woman who deserved a bed, and a space, and a plan that included her. So I booked a room for myself, at another hotel again, 5 minutes away. 5 years of emotional distance closer than they'd ever realize. I paid more than I had budgeted, but that wasn't the cost. The real price was knowing that no one thought, she'll need a bed too. At dinner that night, the hostess checked the reservation. "Party of 8, she said. 8. I made 9, and I stood there, invisible, watching them already seated. Laughter, wine, menus in hand. My brother waved like I'd just walked in from a different country. No one noticed the extra chair wasn't there, because they hadn't made one. It's not that they didn't love me, they just didn't include me. And maybe that's worse. I slid into the booth at the far end. Someone scooted over. No one asked if I was okay. No one said, "We should have noticed." They kept talking about renovations, a friend's divorce, my niece's dance recital, and I watched it happen in front of me. My family had made space for everything, except me. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I smiled. I ate. I paid my share, and I left before dessert. Back in my solo room, the walls felt too white, the silence too loud, and I lay there wondering how many times they'd looked past me over the years. In small, invisible ways I had learned to accept as just how they are. But that night, it felt like a ceremony, like I'd finally graduated from the hope that they would ever really see me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. Just tired of shrinking myself to fit into a picture I was never in to begin with, and maybe that's what broke me. Not that they forgot me, but that they didn't notice I was missing. The morning after the dinner, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even open the family group chat. I opened the blinds, let the light in. I made coffee in the little single-serve machine, sat cross-legged on the hotel bed and stared at my phone. Not waiting, just noticing how much I used to wait, for texts, for explanations, for them to notice me. That was the first morning I realized. I wasn't angry they hadn't saved me a seat. I was angry I kept trying to earn it. I used to ask, what did I do wrong? Now I ask, why did I think it was me? There's something wild about clarity. It doesn't shout. It sits next to you. Quiet, familiar. Like it's been waiting for you to finally look it in the eye. I replayed every childhood dinner, every skipped birthday, every time I was told I was too much, too loud, too opinionated, too ambitious. But not once do I remember being told, "You're allowed to take up space." They taught me to shrink, and I did, for years. I wore politeness like armor, swallowed discomfort with wine, laughed at jokes that made me feel small because that was the only way to stay in the room. But that morning, something shifted. Maybe it was the silence. Or maybe silence was finally something I didn't want to fill with excuses. I used to think strength was staying. Now I know, sometimes strength is not replying. Sometimes it's booking your own room, not just in a hotel, but in your life. They didn't forget me. They excluded me, quietly, politely, and thoroughly. And I kept calling it love. But love doesn't leave you wondering if you belong. Love doesn't need you to disappear to keep the peace. I didn't need an apology. I needed to wake up, because what broke wasn't just the plan. It was the contract I kept signing with my silence. They said I was strong, independent. They said it like a compliment, and I wore it like a chain, because being the strong one meant never asking, never needing, never being vulnerable. But that morning, I needed something. I needed space, not from the hotel. From the story I kept telling myself that if I just kept proving I was enough, they'd finally treat me like I was. I sat there and realized, no more proving, no more auditioning for affection. I wasn't the extra chair. I wasn't the afterthought. I was a whole person, and they just didn't make room for her. Not because I wasn't enough, but because they were never taught how to love someone who didn't shrink. I folded my clothes slowly, packed my bag without urgency. This wasn't running away. It was release. They didn't text me that day, and for the first time, I didn't need them to. I walked down to the lobby, past a family checking in. The mother was fussing with room keys, the dad chasing a toddler. And I smiled, not because I missed that dynamic, but because I saw it clearly now. The effort it takes to make space for someone, to think of them in advance, to count them, and how deeply that effort matters. They didn't notice I skipped breakfast, or maybe they did. Maybe they just knew better than to ask where I was. Either way, I wasn't there. I wasn't where I used to be, the one waiting, orbiting, hoping for acknowledgement. I was across town at a quiet cafe with a window seat, laptop open, headphones in, And for the first time in that entire trip, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I wasn't retaliating. I was reclaiming my peace. I didn't ghost them. I just stopped apologizing for needing space. I let the silence stretch, let it grow around me like a soft coat, not heavy, just warm, protective. I didn't need them to ask if I was okay. I needed to be okay without them asking. They were at brunch. Someone posted a boomerang of mimosas, smiles, clinking glasses, a caption that said, "Family first." And I didn't feel left out. I felt released. I used to think silence was cold. Now I understand. It's a boundary. And boundaries aren't punishments. They're clarity. Sometimes leaving the room says more than yelling in it ever could. They didn't need to hear my reasons, because this wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, finally learning how to leave when I'm not counted. I went to a bookstore, bought a novel I'd been meaning to read, sat by a plant that leaned toward the light and let the afternoon drift. I didn't slam any doors. I just let them close, softly, without explanation. That day, I worked on my pitch deck, the one for my platform, the education startup I'd built brick by digital brick. Not for anyone's approval, not even theirs, just because it mattered. Because I mattered. My slide read, "Visibility is power. We help people see themselves one skill at a time." And as I typed it, I realized that's all I'd wanted. Not applause, just to be seen. That evening, I watched the sun fall behind the city skyline, took a deep breath, and didn't feel like I was missing anything, because I wasn't. They noticed my absence around dinner time. One text came through. "You good?" I replied, resting. And it was the truth, and a boundary. No long explanations, no performance. Imbalance teaches you where not to lean again. I didn't attend the group photo on the last day. Didn't feel guilty for it either, because I was done bending to fit their frame. This wasn't revenge. This was recovery. I've learned that not all exits are escapes. Some are declarations, quiet ones, that say, "I'm done shrinking for your comfort." And maybe it's okay if no one clapped when I walked away, because the silence that used to suffocate me is now the space I use to breathe. I woke up in my own bed, back in Austin, sunlight painting the walls, not the faded, apologetic light of hotel mornings. This was mine. My window, my room, my silence. And this time, silence didn't mean being left out. It meant I had space again, not just physical space, but internal space. Room to breathe, room to exist without explaining. I didn't start over. I just started truer. The version of me who needed to be seen. She wasn't gone. She was finally being met. By me. I opened my laptop, same files, same business, but it felt different. No more chasing relevance. No more editing my voice to make others comfortable. My startup didn't suddenly explode. No overnight success story. But for the first time, I didn't measure my work by who noticed. I measured it by what it gave me back. Dignity, freedom, pride that didn't need to be clapped for. I shifted my schedule. No more clients who drained me. No more calls I didn't want to take. I unsubscribed from being the family disappointment. That role? Retired. I planted basil on the windowsill, bought real sheets, took the extra chair out of the kitchen. Because I was done making space for people who never showed up. I stopped waiting to be invited, to be asked how I was, to be needed in the way I used to beg for. I asked myself instead. Each morning I made coffee for one. And you know what? It was enough. I still checked my email, still opened spreadsheets and pitched documents. But now, every click felt like a vote for the life I was building, not the one I used to explain away. It wasn't reinvention, it was reclamation. Some days I still heard their voices in my head, the ones that said I was too much, too distant, too sensitive. But I let those voices echo and then dissolve, because I'd learned to be louder, not with volume, with value. I walked through my neighborhood like I belonged to it, not because anyone told me I did, but because I decided I did. The world didn't change, I just stopped asking it to. I started asking myself. I booked a solo trip for the spring. No family chat, no coordination. Just me, the ocean, and a journal. Peace didn't arrive like a parade. It came in moments, folding clean laundry, closing my laptop before sunset, watching a plant lean into light and thinking, me too. I still get texts from them, short ones, holidays, birthdays, the surface kind. I respond when I want to, not out of guilt, but out of clarity. That's my boundary now. And it doesn't need defending. It just exists. I didn't build a new version of me. I excavated the one that was always underneath, waiting, patient, true. People say self-love like it's a hashtag, but for me, it was a practice. Daily, quiet, real, no big speeches, no angry exits, just decisions, one after another. Each one saying, you get to choose how you're treated. And it starts with how you treat yourself. I didn't plan on going. Not really. But when the invitation came, the group dinner, the usual cousins, the same restaurant as last year, I felt something shift, not a need to belong, not even curiosity, just a calm knowing. I could go and still be me. So I said yes, not to them, to myself. I wore what made me feel grounded, nothing dramatic, just something that felt like truth. A soft navy sweater, gold hoops, no armor, no costumes, just presence. I walked in alone, no butterflies, no panic, just breath. The table was already half full. Laughter, water glasses sweating onto linen napkins. My mother saw me first. She smiled like nothing had ever happened. And maybe for her, nothing had. They didn't pull out a chair, so I pulled my own, calmly, without apology, without waiting. That's when I knew something had changed, not in them, but in me. My chair wasn't borrowed, it was brought, and it was mine. Someone asked how I'd been. I said, I had a really clear weekend. No details, no performance. And they didn't press. They rarely do. But this time, I didn't take it personally. I took it as information. My brother made a joke, one of those, you're so intense kinds. I didn't flinch, didn't laugh. I just sipped my water and let the silence do what it does best. Say the thing no one wants to say out loud. The table looked the same. But I didn't sit the same way anymore. There's power in not proving anything, in being in a room without needing to dominate or disappear. My mother asked, gently, if I was okay. And I smiled. I really am. And I meant it, because I wasn't there to be accepted. I was there because I no longer feared not being. The food came. The conversations bounced around like soft tennis balls, safe, light, expected. I stayed quiet, not out of discomfort, but out of choice, because stillness can speak too. Someone asked about my work. Sort of. That vague, you still doing that online thing? Kind of question. I said yes. I said I loved it, and I didn't explain anything further, because not every truth needs to be translated for it to be real. The check came. I paid my share, tipped more than I had to, not because I had something to prove, but because generosity feels good when it's not forced. I left before dessert, not to make a statement, but because I'd had enough of the food, of the dance, of the version of me that used to stay just to be liked. No one followed me out, and that was okay. The air was soft outside. Same sky, same city, but a different woman walking back to her car. Because she didn't leave the table angry. She left with her dignity intact, and her chair, metaphorical or not, still under her. Coming home didn't feel like starting over. It felt like stepping back into a space I'd been renovating for years, quietly, slowly, from the inside out. I didn't need a blank page. I needed to reread the ones I'd written in invisible ink, the ones where I whispered, "You are allowed to exist," without explaining. I didn't light a candle or write a manifesto. I opened the window, let the fresh air in, and let the version of me I'd buried breathe again. She didn't need fixing. She needed space. And I was finally ready to give it to her. My days became rituals, not of ambition, but of clarity. I changed my work hours, stopped saying yes to clients who drained me, stopped replying out of guilt, started answering to myself. I booked a solo trip for spring. No family chat, no group coordination, just me, a journal, and the kind of silence that doesn't hurt. Healing didn't mean forgiving them, it meant releasing me. I made peace with unanswered questions, with holidays that might stay hollow, with birthdays where the phone might not ring. But in their place, I built a different rhythm, a slower morning, a cleaner inbox, a deeper breath. I unsubscribed from my old role, the one where I waited to be picked, to be noticed, to be enough. That role doesn't serve me anymore. I still walk by families in the park, still hear stories about sisters who talk daily, mothers who know their daughter's favorite tea. And sometimes, yeah, it stings. But I don't carry the sting like a wound. I carry it like a reminder that I learned to be my own witness, that I didn't have to start over to become whole. I just had to stop hiding. I made space in my home for joy, bought better sheets, framed my own photos, started writing again, not for likes or praise, just for me. Peace didn't come with a banner. It came on laundry days, in quiet moments on the couch, in the way I no longer jump when my phone pings. Sometimes I miss them, but mostly, I miss the version of me who still believed they'd change. She was tender, she meant well, and I'm glad I outgrew her. I didn't rebuild from scratch. I gathered the parts of me that were always there, the boldness, the sensitivity, the stubborn light, and I gave them a home. Not everyone claps when you come home to yourself, but the applause isn't the point. The point is, I look in the mirror and recognize her now, not because she's perfect, but because she's finally mine. I used to think healing had to come with a big conversation, the kind where you cry, explain, pause for effect, and then, finally, they say it. I'm sorry. And everything changes. But that conversation never came, and I stopped waiting for it. Forgiveness isn't a doorway, it's a decision. And one morning, folding towels, I realized I didn't need to forgive them to move on. I just needed to stop expecting them to become people they never promised to be. They don't know what they did, or maybe they do, but either way, it doesn't matter anymore. I still remember the weekend they forgot me, the table that had no chair, the dinner where no one asked how I got there. It used to play like a loop in my head, but now, it's a photograph I don't return to. Not because I've forgotten, but because I've finally stopped framing it as my failure. Peace didn't come from talking to them. It came from not needing to. I stopped checking for messages, stopped hoping for an invitation that wouldn't arrive. And in that absence, I found presence. There's this myth that forgiveness makes you noble, that it elevates you. But sometimes forgiveness isn't a gift, it's a delay, a waiting room for people who might never come back. I didn't block them. I just stopped centering them. They send me holiday texts. The occasional, hope you're well. I reply when it feels honest, and I don't when it doesn't. Closure isn't a conversation, it's a boundary you don't explain. I still see families on Instagram, sisters tagging each other in memes, group dinners, vacations, and sometimes, yeah, I still ache. But it's not a wound anymore. It's a soft scar, the kind that doesn't need covering. Because now I know. What they didn't give me became the reason I gave it to myself. I love myself louder now, not through mantras or affirmations, but in how I protect my peace, how I say no, how I refuse to shrink in rooms I used to make myself small to stay in. Forgiveness used to feel like the finish line. Now it feels like an option, and I chose freedom instead. They might still think I'm distant, cold, unforgiving, but I'm not any of those things. I'm just finished. With the version of me who waited, who pleaded, who believed silence was strength. If I see them again, I won't flinch. I won't fake a smile. I'll nod, not because I'm bitter, but because I've finally emptied the need for anything more. Sometimes healing is just not checking your phone for a message you know won't come. Sometimes it's leaving the group chat without making a scene. Sometimes it's drinking your morning coffee in total quiet and realizing the ache that used to sit on your chest has slipped out the door quietly. Forgiveness isn't the only way through. Sometimes you just let go, not out of grace, but because carrying it is heavier than walking away from it. I still wake up in the same bed, same view, same morning light spilling through the blinds. But everything feels different now. Not louder, not brighter, just mine. I didn't rise above anything. I just stopped sinking into it. This isn't some dramatic reinvention. No grand new me moment. Just a quiet unfolding, like a flower that was always going to bloom once it had space. I'm not healed, not fully, but I'm home. And for the first time in a long time, that's enough. They still haven't called, and I still haven't waited. Success doesn't look like I thought it would. There's no ribbon, no crowd. Just small victories, a deeper breath, an unread message I don't feel guilty about, a calendar that reflects the life I actually want. My peace isn't loud. It's soft, and it stays. I still check my email, but not for them, for me, for what I'm building, for the version of me who no longer needs to prove, just to create. Some mornings I still feel that old ache, that slight tug toward what could have been, but it no longer stops me. I've stopped asking the world for a seat at the table. I've stopped waiting to be called on. I build the thing. I sit down. I speak. And if no one's listening, I still speak. Because the power isn't in being heard. It's in knowing you were worth hearing all along. The woman I've become isn't flawless. She's just whole. And that wholeness, it's quiet. It's steady. It doesn't need defending. I still walk past places that hold memories. Still remember the silence in rooms I wanted to belong to. But now, I walk taller. Not because they welcomed me, but because I welcomed myself back in. I don't miss who I used to be. I miss how long it took to get here. And I honor that version of me. The one who kept showing up, even when no one noticed. I didn't escape my past. I just stopped carrying it. If this story sounds quiet, it's because healing often is. It's the absence of need, the release of old roles, the return to self. I'm not a phoenix, not a warrior. I'm not a comeback story. I'm just here, breathing, choosing. And that, in this world, that's everything. This isn't a happily ever after. This is a deeply okay right now. And I wouldn't trade it for anything.